Hello, everybody. Good morning. How are you? Yes, if you know what this is, I am. Nothing's wrong. It's just Wednesday, right? Happy hump day. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Sorry about that slurp. Good to see you. Welcome back to Coffee Time. I am Deanna and Ribbon Candy Hooking, of course. Let's see who's here. I was just running around doing a couple things before we went live. None of which was dyeing my hair, which is coming soon. Isn't it crazy how, if you do it, how soon it goes away? One of life's frustrating things. Heidi, great to see you. Hello in Belgium. Summer here and maybe finally some rain next weekend after more than a month of sun. Who knows? Oh, I hope so. If you really need it, I hope so. Oh, all the window boxes and parks will be looking so pretty. I love it there. Mom, you're on. And my mom is in Connecticut, near where I am, about an hour away. Mostly nice, and the world is in bloom. Isn't it beautiful, this sort of first green, the way the poets called this color, right, at this time of the season, that first green. It's almost like a fluorescent green. It's like, it's more than a Kelly green, isn't it? It's not like that Irish green. It's just so bright. I guess it's all that chlorophyll, right? Really beautiful time of year. It is so atmospheric, isn't it? When you go out, and I remember one time when I was really young, it's like something that really sticks in my mind. I guess there's a certain point where you become, as a growing person, a bit more conscious of your surroundings and your body and all that stuff. But I remember when we lived in Barrington, right? We lived on a street called Windsor Drive. It would be a dream to move back to that house. Um, I walked out on the back porch one morning just to hang out, and I guess I was maybe a young teen. And I remember thinking, it was the first warm day, and I remember thinking that like the air was so perfectly comfortable outside that it almost felt like the same exact temperature as my body. It was like leaving the house and walking out onto the porch to sit and look at probably my photo album where I had bought lots of photos of Def Leppard, right, and put them into the slots of an actual photo album. Probably that. But it was just so comfortable. I'll just never remember that moment of going out there after, in New England we get such cold sometimes. That first day that was really, really like magical, It is nice. It's this time of year. I hope it is for you too, where you are. Kirsten, great to see you. Cool and sunny in Vermont. Robin, great to see you. I'm gonna send you your invoice later. Patreon people, before I forget, thank you so much for supporting me, for supporting the channel, all of our projects. I have so many things coming up. It's crazy. I've got everything stacked up and a lot of things happening while I'm on Cape Cod. So it'll give me stuff to write about and begin and projects to start. And I always start first with Patreon members because I appreciate the support that you give. I put out yesterday as well as on Sunday patterns that I found in boxes here as I go through the studio, and we're not moving across the way. I'm staying here, but I have about 8 times more space than I did before. So I'm mixing it up and putting different places, different stations for recording videos, informational how-to videos on many different subjects, mostly rug related, of course. But I'm setting up a quilting station too, so we can do some beginner quilt stuff and hooking with quilt fabric and a lot of new things that are coming out immediately. So while working on that, I've been, as you can imagine, unearthing some interesting and exciting things that are just in boxes, things I've been saving. I don't want to say hoarding, but you do have that feeling. I was writing with another seller this morning on Facebook Marketplace. I bought some patterns from someone, some older patterns that I just want for a rainy day, God knows when. But, I was saying there does come a time when you realize is all good intentions aside, and in my mind wanting to at some point thinking about having exhibits, having like small museum type setups and that are based on rug hooking. I do have that in mind, and I am keeping pieces that I think are important for that purpose that I don't immediately want to make. That aside, I still have a lot of stuff. And so as I unearth it, I've been putting it to Patreon members first to say, do you want this? Trying to put quite low prices on it. So everybody that's been writing back yes and send me the invoice, today is the day. I found that box and put that stuff up last night, and I thought, let me just be sure before, because combining shipping is a nice thing, isn't it? Shipping is such a bear lately. But anyway, all that stuff is coming and it's on the way. I also want to remind you, before I forget, I'll remind you at the end, this month or this coming month, the design class is designing like Chagall, Marc Chagall, and he is my all-time favorite. So this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to focus on his sort of midnight village scenes, his carnival and circus scenes, his church windows, all of these things respective in their place, very different moments of Chagall. And I'm working on my Chagall piece. I'll show you that I left it at home. But I'm working away on that, and I've been color changing it like crazy because I'm remembering, if you can picture Chagall, what's the prominent color, right, that he always uses? It's that blue, isn't it? It's like, it's not the Monet blue, right? It's not like the water blue. It's Chagall blue. It's different. The closest thing to it, if you're a dyer, is that new color from Pro-Chem called Imperial Blue. It is such a distinctive color. It's not turquoise. It's not brilliant or cobalt. It's Imperial Blue. It's very, very different. That's kind of the Marc Chagall blue. So every time I go to put into my Chagall piece, as I'm working it, in celebration of this class coming up, every time I put in, and I've done this twice, the trees like green, I think, no, I pull it right back out. Because even though I put like a pistachio green, because I thought, let's keep the colors cool, because Chagall worked a lot in primary colors, a lot of blue, a lot of red. But he didn't do a lot with balancing warm and cool colors. He did a lot with cool colors. So I plugged in a pistachio because I thought, well, that's as cool a green as there is, right? Pistachio and mint greens, that's about as cool as it gets for green. But I ended up pulling it out both times I hooked with different greens because I thought, at least for the piece I'm working on, Chagall didn't often mix that Chagall blue with reds, with fuchsias, with oranges, with green. He just didn't. So it's curious as I go along, I'm realizing I'm trying to hook in his color palette too, even though it's my own design. And I'll show this to you as we go and get you excited for the class because there's already a lot of sign up for this one. We'll talk about all those things in class and we'll keep looking as we go along. Of course, you can make anything, any palette you want, but I'm realizing things that I didn't realize about Chagall's color planning for himself and his paintings as I work on this piece. I think, put something in and then you look at it and you just say, that's just not right. And then you try to articulate why it's not right. And by looking at his pieces and looking, I went to the library and got a ton of books out on him. And then thinking, I should have had a V8. He just never does that, right? Interesting. So more on that. And there's been some good sign up too on this beginner class. Anybody can take it. You don't have to be a beginner, but 1985 Cat is out there with this kit. It's all hand dyed, beautiful traditional colors, a lot of sign up there. So that's a lot of fun too. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm working on some other things that I'll tell you about at the end. There's so much happening right now. It's just crazy. And I'm keeping it calm too. Do you know those moments when things are chaotic around you, but you manage to keep it calm? It's like, what is that? Divine intervention? I mean, that's just not me. It's much more me to like overturn furniture. But lately, just been keeping it right here. Nice, right? Is that what they call adulting? Oh dear. So Robin, you will get an email from me. Barbara, good to see you. Thank you so much for your message. I really appreciated it. Nice and cool. Everybody's cool and comfortable today and sunny so far. Linda, great to see you in New Jersey. And Beverly, windy and rainy. Oh, Beverly, you are always so busy. It blows my mind. There's a few buddies on our Facebook group, which is Rug Cooking and Punch Needle Club, who are just incredibly busy all the time. By the way, I wanted to ask you, if you are on our Facebook page and you are a big Facebook person, if there's anybody who would like to help. Kirsten does most of the moderating on that page by far, right? Most to all of the moderating. But yesterday, if you were up super early on the East Coast, there popped up a truly disgusting piece of junk mail where somebody had somehow attached to our group, Ribbon Candy and Punch Needle Club, for some kind of joyful porn event. And there was a really sort of explicit photo of a girl reclining. And it said, Ribbon Candy Hooking invites you to this fun event. So luckily, a bunch of buddies were on it immediately, but it was that kind of thing. It was an early morning thing. And Kirsten and I went back and forth about it for a good part of the day because it's like, it is what it is, but at the same time, I'd rather that not happen. So if anybody is very involved in our Facebook group and you feel you have time, I would love to make another person an admin to be able to ferret those moments out before they shock and offend people who are new to the group that don't know that we don't have those kinds of parties. So if you're maybe that person, just send me an email or send me a Facebook message and let me know. Sally, great to see you. You are right there. Joan, great to see you. And Karen, clarify for me. I just read your email talking about our content for today, which we're moving toward American Classics, the collection of hooked rugs from the Barbara Johnson collection. We're coming back to this text, which has been the gift that keeps giving for us. Karen, when you said, Karen just sent me an email and I just caught it right before the show. That was one of the things I was doing in between. Just one more. It's coconut, right? That's for breakfast. Karen, you said you were, I forgot the frame in the car. I bought the frame this weekend at that rug hooker's house, and I said, in the bed of the frame, there are a bunch of little toothpicks. And I said, how cute is that? I wonder if she was pulling up her little loops with a toothpick to make sure they were level. And Karen, you wrote to me that was it your mother or your grandmother used to use toothpicks while hooking too, to mark the holes. And what did you mean by that? You didn't mean loops, but you actually meant that they were looking for gaps in the backing where there was like a bit of a holiday. Is that what you meant? I was just curious and I wanted to write you, but I ran out of time. Cindy, great to see you. Oh, I saw that, Cindy. I'm so glad. I'll probably be dyeing that either probably next week, and I'll get that out before I go to the Cape so you can play with all that stuff and have that handy. Crystal, great to see you. Sun is shining in Nova Scotia. Woohoo! I'm going to make some Canada plans for later this year, too. Got to do Cape Cod first, and then we're going to make some plans. Martini Man. Hi, Gayla. Good to see you. I love your screen name. Never too early. Beautiful Missouri. I agree. Dave, great to see you in Toronto. Coffee and shortbread cookies. No shame. That's right. You heard me slurp. No shame. Sue's hello in Kansas. Beautiful sunflower. And is that a little bison? Is that a bison? How cute, Cindy. Good to see you. Barbara, good to see you in gorgeous New York. Kat's Gallery in sunny California. Great to see you. Joyce, hello in Pennsylvania. That's another thing that's on the calendar for the near future is Pennsylvania. And it was my buddy Lisa in Pennsylvania who pulled up that like really borderline offensive thing on the group the other day. She's an early bird, thank God. She sent me a message and my phone just dinged like that and I looked at it and my hand started shaking because I thought, oh my God, how can I remove this from the page before anybody sees it? Cindy says, I got 7 patterns from Dion Fitzpatrick on eBay for $50. Someone was asleep at the wheel. That is a very good price. That is a very good price. That's usually what a little grab bag of strips cost. That is a very good price for a handful of patterns. That is excellent. Sorry, that sounded snarky and I didn't mean it that way. That is a very good find indeed. And I want to remind you, on Monday, I was going back and forth with a seller who I noticed a couple Halloween patterns, which are always dear to my heart, the Halloween stuff. And I snapped a couple up, but I don't go onto the buy and sell group very often for reasons that I won't say. I have a lot of differences with the moderator of that group, so I don't participate. But I do like to buy and sell. And I just want to remind you, and I reminded her, that in our group on our Facebook page, buying and selling on Mondays is absolutely fine. We call them Madcap Mondays, and we look forward to that. And I look forward to seeing what you're selling on Mondays, too, because I don't go into the other buy and sell groups anymore. I also have been moderating our buy and sell group, and I'm just going to say this, even though it's a bit of a negative note. I did have to kick someone out who was a prominent seller on Mondays. Kirsten and I went back and forth with it quite a few times, but there were enough sort of complaints and worries about this person's ethics that I removed them from the group and obviously consequently being able to sell. So having said that, spam risk, having said that, I do try to moderate the buying and selling at least a little bit so that we know that the people we're dealing with have some kind of moral foundation and are accountable for what they're doing. So that's very important to me. I hate to do those things, you know, but it was a necessary call. Linda Ann, good morning. Cooler morning there today in Edmonton, 5 degrees Celsius. Yeah, I'll say that's a little on the cool side. It's about 41. That's still quite cool. But I bet it'll get more comfortable as the day goes on, right? Oh, Wyatt, well, are you in Wisconsin? I'm just checking the thread here to see what you all are talking about. Teresa, great to see you. Oh, I just want to be sure. Susie, great to see you. And Lynn, I just like to see what you're all writing because you're asking each other where you are. Karen answered about your grandmother would flip the rug over on the back side, and then she thought when she thought she was done, and she would mark with toothpicks where she needed to fill in. That is fantastic information. I've never heard of that. That's really cool. So in other words, she's not packing as she goes. She's looking for little holidays, which are gaps in your hooking after the fact. Interesting. That is so orderly, isn't it? So that's where the toothpicks maybe come in. Maybe not doing that thing with like even pile, but actually marking the holes. That is very cool. Interesting. We find out so much when we work together. I'll leave all that stuff for later. So let's get into our content. We left off on Monday. Really fun time talking about the Barbara Johnson collection. And we were talking a little bit about Barbara Johnson's wife. She came from Life, not her wife. She is the wife in this case. So she comes from Poland, and she starts working as a maid in the home of the Johnsons. And I think her name was Essie, right? Esther hired her. And Barbara had an art background, right? She had a bachelor's in art history, so she appreciated fine art. She recognized fine art, and Cinderella story. Working as a maid, the Johnsons ended up getting divorced, and Mr. Johnson married Barbara, and at that point, it put her right at the top of like the Fortune 500 list of wealthiest women in the world. So she was in a great position to begin to do all of the humanitarian work, right? She was very interested in charitable, philanthropic type projects, and she used her money that way. So that always makes me feel good to say that and to know that, rather than being a little pig and sitting on your fortune, right? So she was very good that way. And one of the things she did was amass many collections in many different areas of art and design, many different kinds of collections that, would become very important for people to document, to reference, to learn, to share. And we are enjoying one of her collections. That's her hooked rug collection, which was really dear to her. So that the best reference for Barbara Johnson's hooked rug collection is this book. You do find miscellaneous rugs here and there, mostly on Pinterest, many dead links that are other rugs that were in her collection. But this book that we're looking at is just chock-a-block full of rugs that she chose. And as we continue our conversation, we will come around to that sort of where we ended yesterday, talking about culling one's collection, whatever it is, right? My buddy Kira just started collecting, I probably shouldn't say it, but chocolate molds. I have one or two of those, and I haven't gone pedal to the metal with that because they are quite expensive. And ice cream molds, that kind of thing. Even butter molds is something that I would love to collect, but one has to choose what collections they're focusing on, because without infinite money, unending funds, you have to make tough choices, right? So whatever you do collect, you come to a point where you say, I've got these kinds and I've got these kinds, and these are the ones I tend to want to put on the wall, but these have been rolled up in a closet for 10 years, so maybe I don't need these as much. Doesn't mean that they're less or more, just means that those aren't the ones that are your go-tos, right? And there comes a time when you might want to say to yourself, funds aside, I really don't use these, and maybe somebody would enjoy them more than me. Maybe somebody likes the primitives more than I do. Maybe somebody loves the sort of high pile or the Waldoboro more than I do, right? Real specific. And in that case, it's nice to think about turning them over, refocusing, recentering your collection, and looking for more of exactly what you like. I feel like looking at Barbara's collection, that's something that she did over time. As her knowledge of hooked rugs grew, as she collected, it seemed like she started going toward rugs that were more important. But it's very hard to were more important in terms of value. Let's say the earlier rugs that are more important in terms of value. It's not necessarily your favorites or my favorites, right? My favorites tend to be like the 1980s ones that are super colorful, and I think I know who the designer is, and they're lots of fun. I like some of the older primitive ones too, but as far as the ones I display, they tend to be like pretty colorful ones. So that happens to be an old one, but you know what I mean. So in any case, let's look at some more of her collection, and I'll probably end up returning to the subject on Friday Night Cocktail Night because Wendy, thank you, sent me a beautiful article from a past ATHA magazine, right? ATHA, Association of Traditional Rug Hooking Artists. I forget what issue it is off the top of my head, and I'm not doing it in today's episode, so that brings us to Friday. She sent me a great article where an ATHA group in Pennsylvania, and Lisa referenced this for me too. No, Jennifer Cantrell, I think, did. I think it was Pennsylvania, used this design that they called Pinnacle, because I think the Honey Beehive sells this too in Manchester, Connecticut. The original one that I used for the thumbnail for Monday's episode, let me tell you the name, at least that Barbara had for this particular one. It's a moving target, right? Because it's not a commercial pattern. This one in the book on the cover is called Reflections in Red and Blue. This Atha group took that design and each did it differently, right? In a sort of contemporary way. And like I was saying, for that, before I knew this about the Atha group, you could really take a design like this. It looks almost like a window that's been stretched, or the top of a church window. You could really take any design for windows, stretch it, and fill it in however you liked. Well, that's just what they did. And now I have this beautiful Atha article to share with you on Friday that Wendy sent. She'll hopefully be with us on Friday because she's not with us today, where we can talk about that together and look at that as a possibility, a nice project for us to do. So where we left off, Maryland is beautiful today. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. I am so happy that that cold weather and that bleakness is finally lifting, right? Let's see where we left off. Let's try, holy mackerel, that's it. Can you believe it? Let me just be sure. Yeah, can you believe it? It's my lucky day. Time to get some scratch tickets. So this is a beautiful piece that in the Barbara Johnson book is called Compass Stars. So as you can see, this is more than a runner, right? This is a stair runner. This wouldn't, I mean, this could go in someone's hall, but it would be an extremely long hall. This is for the stairs. What a beautiful runner. This is the kind of a runner that goes on the top and riser of each step, just ba-bump, 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 right up, right? These are great trippers too. I hate carpeted stairs because I've fallen too many times. But it does look beautiful to have carpet on the stairs, particularly this carpet, Compass Stars. 1870 is the date that they've put on it. It's a wool and cotton rag rug on burlap backing, 15 inches by 218 inches, made on Nantucket, Massachusetts. It's a stair carpet companion piece in the collection, measures 63 by 15. So I don't think we might see the companion piece, I'm not sure. But it's nice to know there is a companion piece, probably for one of the landings, right? Really beautiful. So another great example of a non-commercial pattern, design that somebody did that's very, very close to a quilting pattern, right? The pinwheel. Lots of nice touches happening here. Beautiful solid colors within the pinwheel shapes, but then in between the two pinwheels, they've done a very thoughtful diagonal hit or miss stripey. I mean, isn't that neat? It really creates an optical illusion. Whenever we think about optical art and pop art, we always think of the middle 20th century, right? The 50s, 60s. Well, no, this is super optical art, right? Isn't it? Look at the way that the ground of this rug, if it was on the stairs, would be leading you up or leading you down. It's a top to bottom hit or miss ground. And then these beautiful pinwheels on top, and then even that thoughtful addition of the decoration between the pinwheels, still hit or miss in slightly brighter colors, but tipped sideways. Because wouldn't it have been easy to just keep going with, you know, the side to side, but they tipped it in the opposite direction to create a further pattern. So thoughtful. The things that you can do with the simple geometric are really remarkable, right? I mean, this is just a great example. Look at the colors here. Really unusual colors. Now, this kind of, to me, screams experimenting with natural dyeing from the yard. Maybe not, but I'm looking at these colors, right? Like these dark browns that could be like the chestnut colors. This is New England. The light kind of dusty rose colors, I'm taking into account this is probably faded. And the sort of darker berry colors that you get from a lot of berries and leaves, stems, things like that. The yellows, I mean, these rose and yellows are the easy, and the kind of purpley roses are the easiest colors to get out of plants in New England. These are the ones we see a lot of. We see a tiny bit of blue, which makes me think, well, maybe somebody cut up a garment as well. But there's enough yellow and berry-produced shades in here to make me think that somebody was fooling around with a little bit of dyeing, and how fun that must have been experimenting to put a piece this large together, right? It is a great way to use up worms. Absolutely, Karen. I mean, what you know, you do keep your worms, right? Because nobody throws wool away. We're not that cavalier. But when you have your worms and they're often different widths, right, different sizes, sometimes they're just kind of sitting there turning into their own weird hornet's nest, right? Like a weird dust bunny. And the longer they seem to sit, the more frazzled they get, even when nothing is touching them. They seem to fall out of grace somehow and get all ratty tatties. So it is a good idea every once in a while to reset yourself and say, listen, I'm going to do a hit or miss pattern, and I'm put those worms right in front of me. I'm just going to use them. I'm going to use them, and use them in this kind of a manner. What a lot of fun. I'm going to say more on that in just a minute, but this idea of hit or miss obviously is really synonymous with this era, late 19th century rugs, because they didn't have the stores where they would go and buy wool, right? They had dry goods stores or general stores or peddlers that would come through that would sell them mostly cottons. But for wools, you would not be looking at buying yardages of wool, right, to use for under your feet. I mean, if you bought wool, you would be thinking about making outer garments or something for the house, but not something for the floor. So it's really neat to see with these hit or miss patterns and to speculate upon where are they getting this fabric, certainly from their clothing. But when you see a color palette, even this one that has so much of the same color, you do have to think, gosh, I wonder if this person was fooling around with dyeing. This is an 1880 Tumbling Block. So this is another very op art geometric, another quilt pattern, right? This is based on a quilt pattern, an early geometric that was kind of hijacked by Escher later on. Not on purpose, of course. It's just we associate this kind of look either with Escher or with video games. But this is a much older pattern than that. It gives such great sort of optical illusion, right? It looks almost like a small village of little storage units or tumbling blocks or children's building blocks. A lot of the same colors in this, which does make you wonder, did they figure out how to use some kind of dyeing to over dye like a white or a camel color that they had a quantity of? It's a lot. This is not a small piece either, 75.5 by 19.5, made in Pennsylvania, cotton and wool on burlap using rags. So again, we just don't know. I suppose a really proper study of a rug at some point, scientific study, could really determine whether the base for example, all of that kind of sagey green is the same fabric or different fabrics. Probably with our eye, if we were standing close enough to it, you could look and say, well, it's practically the same color, right? And it's used the same way from one motif to the next, but this wool is much thicker than that. That would be a good clue that indeed they are using some kind of dye, whether it be an aniline dye or a natural dye. They are using some kind of dye to over dye something that they already have, right? And then that brings us to a different level of respect for the maker, because they are doing the whole thing beginning to end, not just kind of filling things in with whatever they had in hand. They're really, really doing the process top to bottom. So interesting. So many ways to look at every piece, right? Now, this is a very graphic piece called Liberty Cap. And I'm guessing that's a reference to like the hat of the Statue of Liberty, the lady in the harbor. Liberty Cap, 1895. So that's right around the right time for a reference to the Statue of Liberty. Cotton and wool on burlap, half circle, so like welcome mat style, 46.5 by 26.5, made in Frederick, Maryland. Ex Frederick Hansen collection. So this does have provenance and pedigree. It belonged to the Frederick Hansen collection before it came to the Barbara Johnson collection. I don't know where, like I said on Monday, where any of these rugs are now. Just taking a quick sip. Have a gander. Now this is a neat piece because it's very graphic. And we do see motifs like this, right? This is like on Monday we were searching for the word pinnacle or binnacle or something like that. I forget what it was, sexton in the end. And we came up with the word compass rose. This does have some things in common with the compass rose. As far as quilting references, this has a lot in common with a much newer style of quilt called the New York Beauty, right? Have you seen that one that has these really, really pronounced, very acute points? Very, very hard to do from a quilting perspective. Also hard to do from a rug making perspective, but it's that kind of a pattern, really exaggerated points. And I like that it's named Liberty Cap because it does have that feel, doesn't it? You can almost see like the forehead and the water in the distance behind the stars. It is very graphic. It is very pretty. It's not in your face patriotic, but it does have that feel. It's kind of a cross between the celestial pattern and the Statue of Liberty. It is very different, very simple, right? It's not my favorite piece in the collection. There's not so much that we can say about this, but it is nice to know that people were creating patterns by hand that are not commercial patterns like this one, using very simple lines, very simple, and that it has such graphic impact, even with two colors. Such a good design, right? Beverly says, looks like a mariner's compass pattern. Mariner's compass. Okay. Oh, neat. With the stars, does the stars in between come into the mariner's compass pattern too? I think that is so pretty. Just gives you, especially if you're a beginner, gives you ideas for very simple tricks you can do with your pattern making, your homemade pattern making. You put things down on a paper and you think this isn't enough. Well, very often it is enough. It's quite pretty, and it will just depend on what you do with color. But chances are you're going to be really gratified and happy with what you come up with, even with these very simple designs. Here's another one that falls right into that category, 8-star prize, 1890, wool rags on burlap. And this is 39 by 30.5 inches, just from New England. Again, a very simple star pattern, just a few stars, stars on the corner, and then as many stripies as they could make with the hit or miss worms, right? Using up the worms. I like how with this rug, they did a few different things, right? They realized, I think, that they boxed the stars in real close together, and maybe they felt that the ground was too unbalanced, and they dropped in 2 vertical lines, just dark lines, to bracket up the center a little bit so that those stars were not so floaty and were a little more contained. Very cute. They might have run out of colors, right? It's entirely possible, looking at the stars in the hit or miss, that they maybe ran out of colors, and they thought, like, I don't want this much background, let me at least drop one more stripe in to each side. I like how on the corners, and I don't know if it's intentional, on the very corner sides of the 4 stars in the corners, they laid off, right? They laid off with the color. Did they run out of the colored worms? Possibly, probably. But in any case, it does do something with your eye. It has a lot of, I love this one too, Lynn. This is such a good oldie. I love how your eye is so busy with those hit or miss lines, and the stars really anchor you, right? I'm super patriotic. I love to see a good star motif. My eyes are so busy with the stars in the corner, right, and the stripes, that when you get to the corners and there's an absence of color and pattern, it's almost like somebody accidentally erased the color. It's a bit uncomfortable, because what we're always told in terms of composition is be careful about the way that your lines resolve themselves. You don't want the eye to be carried invisibly, unremarkably out of the composition. I feel that with this composition, when you get to that corner and there is suddenly an unexplainable absence of color, it does take your eye drifting a little bit on the sloppy side out of the picture, right? It's kind of like, oh, it's surprising. It doesn't make it bad. Obviously, it doesn't make it wrong. Composition-wise, it would probably have been stronger if they had a lot of very dark fabric, and in the corners, they put, for example, just solid black or navy, or even bright red, something like that, just to anchor those 4 corners like a picnic blanket. You want to rock on every corner so it doesn't blow away. Same principle when it comes to composition. It is a remarkably beautiful rug. I would take it any day. I really love it, but it gives us the opportunity to talk about composition in that way, because things can get lost. But again, we are also looking at the history and the evolution of folk design, right? This is absolutely folk design, and over time people figure out what makes a strong motif. They were onto it with quite a few elements in this piece. I like the way that they boxed a little bit closer, right? They shaved the sides off that inner box with those two dark lines. I think that's smart. I think it looks tidier. I also like the way that they outlined those inner stars and then put a second border that looks like it was maybe red or brown or rust. I like that. It creates a little echo, a little shadow, a little imprint of each star. Almost like a cookie cutter. You feel that that inner star is very different than the little shade darker that's around it. It's interesting. So they've got some things that were intuitively going right, and other things that I'm not going to say were going wrong were either experiments or the product of running out of your colors, right? Because at this point, this rug is all but done. Are you going to sit on your thumb and wait for more material to present itself so you can do the corners a darker color? Or are you just going to finish it with the material that you have left in your rag bag and get it down on the floor? It's certainly going to be the latter, isn't it? Sally says, it looks like they were imitating wood. You know, that's not a bad thought. It does look like that, doesn't it? It's a real attempt at some kind of a grain. And people did seem to understand the concept of hit or miss. This is a whole conversation that I can't really participate in or moderate because I don't know the answers. But if you think about it, I'm going to come back to you for a minute. If you think about, this is an abstract question that I'm putting to you. If you think about folk art in terms of the rugs that we look at often, isn't it interesting that people seem to understand instinctively how to do hit or miss, like just straight lines? Isn't that interesting? Because what would be, like, what's the preface to it, right? What's the preface to it? It's not going to be like tapestry, right? Tapestries are usually figural or pattern driven. You don't get tapestries that are just done all willy-nilly with stripes. What is the basis? How did people go from having nothing to wanting to collect scraps, make an original design, and then instinctively go to that border or that background and start striping it in? I mean, that to me has always been a very curious thing and a disconnect in what to me is a common sense idea. Because for me, it's much more common sense to do a marble cake background where you have a shape and you start to radiate or echo around the shape. But when you start to go very geometric with a mix of colors with no regard for color planning, and you create that very geometric hit or miss, where does that come from? Because I can't think of any textiles from that time that were not very fussy, right? Textiles became less fussy as time went on. But the textile that we see most during this period, the Colonial Era Textile, is more the overshot that I talk about a lot, that is a woven. And it is very fussy. Even if there's only 3 or 4 colors in it, it is very complicated and fussy. Everything was pattern driven. I don't know how people got to start doing this, but it is universal. Around areas where people were early rug makers, 19th century hooked rug makers in New England, they just did it. It's like, it's one of these natural things that's built in. But it's curious to me. It's very curious. I look at a lot of folk art. It's my favorite category of art. And I keep coming back to that idea of where does it come from? How did so many people in remote areas just do it? Lynn, I'm going to read your comment. I see you wrote something good there. Let me come back to where we are here. And I'm going to pop the next one for us here. So here is Pinwheels. And this dates to 1910, right? So we're getting into the Deco era here. Wool and rayon rag on burlap. And of course, rayon is a big material here too, both for outer garments in terms of like costume and clothing, pattern making and fashion, but also inner garments, lining, right? Also lingerie. So rayon would be something that people had a lot of. Woolen rayon rag on burlap, measurements 31 by 19.5 inches, made in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. The design is a Penn Dutch hex design. Well, that's clear, isn't it? So first, I'm just going to pause for a second and see what Lynn says. Lynn says, I personally see abstract in nature all the time. Well, that's a great point. And that is probably why this rug attracts me. I think I would have gone with flowers instead of stars, but then that would be my project. That's a great point. That's a really great point. interesting, and it's interesting that you also brought up the wood grain, because wood grain is quite close to like geometric hit or miss, isn't it? It's just strip after strip after strip. I guess in theory, so is, for example, laying down a road, right, with bricks or cobbles. You're just going, strip by strip, piece by piece. I don't know. I guess for rug making, I guess that the nature of it is you use that piece, however long it is, you just use the whole thing, right? And maybe that's how it evolved. You just lay it down like you would a brick road, and however long you can hook it until it runs out, there it is, and here comes the next one. I mean, I guess that is the nature of hit or miss. It's just, I guess it's the best way to use every bit of all of those worms, right? I mean, that must be it. It can't be something magical. But you're right about references to nature. That is true. And it's certainly true that people in that period were constantly looking toward nature for everything, for art and design ideas, for decorating, for pottery, porcelain, textiles, clothing, paintings, everything. Also, cues on when to plant, cues on when to travel, everything. Life revolved around nature, and your existence revolved around nature. Your safety revolved around nature. So people were constantly looking, and probably much more observant than we are today, just looking at little things. That's a great point. Sorry, my phone is beeping. Who knows? Who knows who it is? So coming back to this pinwheels. Now, to remember me saying, and I haven't done it yet, but I dyed this new collection. It's the Deco Collection here of Songs of a Summer Night, right? Lots of sort of typical Deco colors, unexpected this time of year, because I had just done the Prim's palette, which is like the Prim Cottage Garden, which is the lighter palette. I wanted to do something that was a bit like blasting it out. And I ended up doing Songs of a Summer Night, all different names of songs in Deco colors. So just so you know, as a side note, if you ordered the swatch kit, which is a piece of each of these colors for this month, if you ordered Songs of a Summer Night, then this is the pattern on fiber tape that you're getting, right? This is the one that goes with that set. So you haven't ordered it yet because I haven't put it up yet. I just remembered. But this pinwheel design, I chose it because we were covering this book and because I was doing a Deco era design. I turned it into this, right, pinwheels, coming back here, and let me see if I can find it again. And that comes on fiber tape, so you can easily transfer it onto whatever your backing is. It's already sticky and it's already ready for you. But that is Deco with Deco, I thought was a good call. Nope, I'm doing all kinds of spoilers. There we go. So this is Pinwheels, dates to 1910, wool and rayon, again, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Very simple, not surprising it's from Pennsylvania because it does have that hex kind of feel to it, right? That very Penn Dutch hex. This is another nice hit or miss rug. Look at that central ground, that brown background, the bottom right-hand corner. A little bit of color change there where there's some running out. It's a repeat of the same color that's on the right-hand side around that red kind of diamond shape or oval shape. Some repeats here, some running out here. The very best of a nice old piece. People really using up every scrap of what they've got. Another great example and simple example. The reason I chose this for Songs of a Summer Night swatch set is because I figure you could do this with the same thing in mind, right? This piece has a dark ground in the center and in the sides, right? Both, not the same color. And they're even patching out colors. So you could, in theory, just use the dark colors of this set for the backgrounds and then use the light colors from the set to plug in those pieces of the pinwheel, right? Because that, with the same set, the person that we're talking about in 1910 having done this, that's exactly what they would have done. Sat down with these swatches, because they're like oversized swatches, separate the darks from the lights, and then start figuring out your color planning, knowing that you are absolutely at peace with using the darks interchangeably. That is the key to hit or miss. You want contrast and you want to separate the darks from the lights. You can do some playing, right, with the middle grounds, but you really want to, in your mind, say, this one's dark, this one's dark, this one's dark, maybe this one's dark, but you really want to separate them before you get started, and then put your extreme lights, and then put your middle ones for when it's time to play and figure something else out, right? But that's exactly what this kind of a pattern is meant for. It's to challenge you to use what you already have, small amounts of lots of colors, to do this kind of a design. Pinwheels. So let's see what our next buddy is going to be here. Coming back down. There we go. And come on, Deanna. Talk about quilt designs. Log cabin, right? Unmistakable quilt pattern. This is the sort of classic kind of Amish take on, this was made on Nantucket, 1880. This is all wool yarn, wool and rayon on burlap, 49 by 34, made on Nantucket. This is one of the rugs that belong to Joel and Kate Kopp, right? That's in that beautiful book that we have not covered properly, the definitive landmark 1974 book by the Kopps. We will cover that soon on Coffee Time. So this is actually in that book, right? So great provenance there, great usage. Also used again, Weissman, Lavitt, Labors of Love. Also used in a Knopf book. Those are usually fiction books, 1987. Maybe it was a cover design or something. It's got a bunch of references to other places where this exact rug has been used or this image has been used. So this is what in Amish terms, in terms of quilt making, we would call like shadows and light, right? When they do like a log cabin and they've got the diagonals going through are the darker shades, right? And you don't always get the exact counterpart, right? Look at about the center, the northeast center. There's a square with yellow and black, right? Top left is yellow, top bottom is black. The black is not a continuation of the yellow, right? Mustard or gold would be a continuation of the yellow, but it still works. When you put your darks in the bottom, right bottom corner of your log cabin and you keep your brights in the top left, you will end up with a shadows or shade and light pattern. And this is very Amish in conception and design. Very, very simple way to use darks and lights. And this isn't really a log cabin because the corners are not connected in the true log cabin way as far as a quilter would define a log cabin. These are just squares, squares within squares within squares, but the diagonal break in the center really gives it the look of a log cabin quilt, doesn't it? Beautiful mellow colors. The rugs from this period, this is all the geometrics chapter at the beginning. We've only got one more that fits into the geometrics chapter. Very mellow colors from this period, as you would expect, because these in general are thrift rugs, right? I think they're all thrift rugs from this period. People using what they have and dyeing what they have. And even with those two possibilities, you are still limited in terms of recycled materials that you can put your hands on. And even if you're dyeing on Nantucket in the 1880s, you are going to be limited color-wise. You would be limited today with what grows in your dye garden color-wise. So we are seeing a more mellow palette that I think we now recognize as a historic palette, because whether we know it or not, we look at these colors and we know that these are colors that we have seen in old rugs. So these must be historic colors, and they are. We're not seeing those new, Cushing flower power colors. We're not seeing Reseda green. We're not seeing imperial blue. We're not seeing those colors yet. So we know it, whether it's in the front of our mind or not. We know that we can recognize older rug palettes. We will talk in more detail in the future about how to recognize an old rug, not just from its quality and its condition, but in terms of like looking at the color and figuring out how it's made. We will get more and more into that technical part of things on Coffee Time and Cocktail Time. This is the last rug that's in the chapter on geometrics. It's called Mennonite Sun. I think that's a beautiful name. 1930. It's just all wool on burlap, and this is an oval. It's a distinctive oval, though, isn't it? It's a bit of a boxed out oval, and it's not quite an oval. It's almost like somebody drew an oval. It's irregular, and then it's hard to keep it an oval with your hooking, isn't it? But talk about a masterpiece. This is really, it's enormous. It's 105.5 inches by 73 inches, made in Pennsylvania. This appeared in House and Garden magazine, September 1984 issue, Mennonite Sun. I mean, Compass Rose, New York Beauty, whatever you want to call this kind, in quilting language, this kind of extremely complicated composition. Not just the central motif, but the border. I mean, these are really sharp angles that we're looking at. This is insanely fine, insanely fine. Really the height of deco. Not super deco colors, right? Not all these colors are reading deco to me, like the tomato red and the forest green. Even the aubergine for me is right on the edge. But these are the colors that somebody had lots of, and it really is an extraordinary color palette. I can't account for the fading because I'm not seeing it close enough or in person, but I do see that there's a lot of use of mixed colors or tweed colors. Certainly some kind of black and white plaid or herringbone, probably plaid, because it's really defined. If you search with your eye for those moments where you see that black and white print, really interesting. Karen says, I love the way the scallops break up the points. I do too. They need to be there, don't they? Because without those oversized scallops, this composition would be really a lot. The scallops give it almost like a rope quality because it does have a compass quality, and I'm reading those scallops, kind of like scallops or little clamshell, right, motif, that kind of thing. Also like rope. It looks a little bit like rope to me. It does have a very masculine nautical feel for me, despite the amount of green in it. Those scallops have to be there. If those points just led to the oval border that already is a little bit square on the right and a little bit round on the left, it would be a hot mess, pig's breakfast style. This really is perfect the way that it is. And it's not perfect, and that's one of the things that makes it great. So many points radiating out of the center. The center is crisp. There is good color planning at the center. They have got those four colors, olive and sort of russet or tomato, and then the gold with the forest green. They have got those in place. There is such a confusion of color and angles behind it that it almost looks like violent, right? It almost looks like a crazy sea creature or pincushion. It's sharp. It's not easy to look at. It's not soft to look at, but it would be even harder to look at without the interruption of those solid scallops. Those absolutely have to be there. I just can't imagine doing a piece like this. It is so glorious. At the same time, it just gives me stomach cramps because I can't imagine making it and thinking, holy mackerel, so many color changes, so many choices. But this person was an absolute master of color planning and a master of understanding contrast. You know, with this many colors, it could have so easily gone messy. And it is sharp, it is crisp. And that's because the color contrast is really, really well done in every part of it. There is no part that your eye looks at and goes, it's a little bit dark there. It just doesn't happen. Your eye travels right the way around, even the border, right, which is secondary, even the border, and it goes dark light, dark light, dark light. And then there's those in-between colors, right? Picking out your darks, your lights, and your biggest pile is going to be the middle colors. And those middle colors are very important. And where does the real art and talent come in? The real art and talent comes in not from deciding what your darks and your lights are, but in pulling that pile, your largest pile of the in-between colors towards you and saying, all right, it's you and me now. I know what my darks are, I know what my lights are, but you got to come toward me now because you're my biggest category, the in-between colors. And that's where natural talent and also studying color and the color wheel comes in, experimenting, putting colors next to each other. Don't experiment with hooking something and pulling out. Just put the colors next to each other and say, like, is it working? Are these very different from each other? One way of doing that is always going to be put your cool against your warm color. You know which colors are cool and which colors are warm, or at least you can figure that part out really easy, right? If you're not sure about contrasts and secondary colors and tertiary colors, put your warms and your cools from your middle pile right next to each other and say, all right, well, this is a warm green, this is a grassy green, this is a first green, this one's a mint green. These are not, they're both green, but they're not alike at all. this one goes with the cool colors, this one goes with the warm colors. And then if you know that, when you're sorting things out, you can build. You can build something as complicated as this with just a little bit of thinking, knowledge, planning, and it's just a good opportunity to sit on your butt with your drink, look and sort and look and sort, and if you get some piles going that are defined, that you feel are correct in your mind, and you're ready to start using them as such, then you have spent the day well, because that's a project, right? Denise, oh, good to see you, Denise. And Sally says, I would love doing the border around other things too. Yeah, that border, this border is fantastic. If you picture this composition without the giant compass in the center, the starburst, and you had a figural center, a picture center, a pastoral center, skyscrapers in the center, skyscrapers. Imagine if you had your city skyline, whatever your city is, these beautiful city skyline in grays, maybe a little bit of dusty rose where the sun is hitting. I got to work that in. You know, you could put anything in the center of this and it would look so cool. I just thought skyscrapers because I'm still thinking deco. But you could do anything in the center of this kind of composition and it would be so pretty, wouldn't it? You could put text in the center of this. Keep it simple with text. This is a great, those scallops and those kind of flying geese, the diagonals around the border, center aside, those are classic motifs, both of them. So you could put anything in the center. You could work in a primitive in the center. It doesn't have to be something that looks modern and pop art. You could do anything in there and it's gonna work because those are old motifs too. Heidi says, making a hooked rug in between seeing all these beautiful and interesting things. What a life. That is so true. What a life. What a good combo, huh? There's so much more to say on this rug. I'll probably we'll look at one more from, you know what, maybe we'll stop there. Let's stop there because we are at the end of this section on looking at geometrics. And we're going to be moving on Friday into the section on looking at florals and figurals and animals. They're kind of, yeah. And then reflections. There's a chapter called Reflections of Society. And in that chapter on Friday, we'll be looking at some beautiful like fireside scenes, some truly folky landscapes, beautiful outdoor scenes. I'm just flipping through and looking at what we're going to be looking at. Pictures of people's houses, and then some of the earlier Ralph Burnham style, like the Ben Franklin, the George Washington with the apple tree, and then some truly original, not commercial patterns. Charles Lindbergh's plane and the Hutchinsons are all going to come into it on Friday. So some Adam and Eve. We've got some beautiful rugs coming up on Friday, but not geometrics. We have stayed the course with the geometrics, and there's so much to be said about them because I think geometric patterns often get dismissed as being basic or beginner or just too simplistic. And I think that's a big mistake because the remark that was just made is such a solid one that even pulling the border off an antique rug like any of these that are absolutely copyright free, right? Not the photograph, but the design. And then doing whatever you want in the center. These are great ideas for making your own designs. Geometrics are so stable in terms of composition. You've got a good geometric going in part of your design. You can really afford to do a mashup and add something figural, add some kind of storytelling piece in the center, add text, add organic leaves and shapes and flower petals. It all works. So conversations about geometrics are never wasted. It's an important conversation to have again and again. But on Friday, we will move on to florals, sort of pastorals, outdoor scenes, people, and late 19th, early 20th century rugs that are in the Barbara Johnson collection. I'll be showing you some rugs that are akin to these rugs that are the same age, not from the Barbara Johnson collection, just kind of widening our scope a little bit. But we've got a lot more to see. So our theme for Friday will still be very old rugs that are very important rugs to our rug hooking history, but also to the evolution and taste of folk art, right, in our little niche, which is hooked rugs. So that's what we have to look forward to on Friday. I'm putting out some orders now. I'm going to get all those invoices out for those patterns. Thank you to Patreon members for supporting me. I will continue to always offer things first to Patreon members because I really do appreciate the support for this channel. It's a lot of hours a week I spend prepping for these episodes, gathering materials for these episodes, and running these episodes. So I really appreciate your support. And then everything that is available after it goes through Patreon, of course, always comes to our Facebook group, Rug Cooking and Punch Needle Club, things that are up for sale there. But I will continue to post some new things and remind you of what is new at Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm trying to get my ducks in a row because the end of next week I will be out on Cape Cod and I will be kind of like it will be Bermuda Triangle time for me. So I'm trying to get as many things set up as possible to keep us busy and to keep us going with projects. If you want projects to work on, I want to be working on similar projects with you while I'm sitting at the pond with the kids, right, during that vacation time. So I'm getting all of that set up now, and I'll have a lot more to share and a lot more links and things that you can buy, look at, download on Friday when I come back to you for cocktail time, 7 p.m. on Friday, Eastern Standard Time. I will see you then. If you have anything to tell me in the meantime, write me at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. And otherwise, I will see you on Friday. Have a great day, everybody.